2 weeks ago, I set myself a pretty random challenge to read 14 of the best books about personal finance using the app Blinkist. So if you're looking to educate yourself about the world of personal finance, this is probably going to be the video for you. I'll tell you about the books I chose to read, my top 5 books from the list of 14, and summarize the core themes from the books for you to be able to apply them in your own life. A quick heads up, I don't want to bombard you with lots of video and B-roll footage that you see in other YouTube videos. I don't know about you, but I find this actually distracts me from learning and retaining the content. Instead, I'll be using slides and moving at a bit of a slower pace. So I hope that's cool with you. You can of course put me at 1.25 or even 1.5 speed if you're feeling ambitious and want to move through things faster. But I do recommend having a pen and paper nearby or a Google Docs open to take notes as we go. Now, if you haven't heard of Blinkist before, essentially it gives you concise and actionable book summaries in both written and audio form. But as strange as it may sound, an issue I've encountered before with Blinkist is that it almost makes reading too easy. There's always that temptation to feel like you're learning, maybe skim through the written summaries in a rush, or listen to the audio summaries without really paying that much attention. And I wanted to avoid that this time. So instead, I resolved to create diagrams of what I felt were the most interesting points from the 14 books, and turn this into one master document, if you like, with the key takeaways. How did I choose which books I was going to read, though? Well, I did the sensible thing that most people would do and searched terms on Google's like best books on money or top 10 books about personal finance. Of course, there are many awesome books on money that I will have missed on this list, but with 14 in the bag, my thinking was that I could get a solid overall understanding of different themes that probably appear time and time again in this topic. There's also that idea you sometimes hear being floated around the internet that by reading 3 books on a topic, you'll know more than 95% of the world population. Now, is there science to back this up? I'm not so sure. But don't you think it's motivating to consider, okay, never mind 3 books. If I read almost 5 times as many books as that, how far can I take my level of knowledge on this topic? Maybe we can reach the top 97% or the top 99%. Well, can't hurt to try, I figured. Which books did I read then? Here's the list and let me know in the comments which of them you may have heard of or already read. The Barefoot Investor, Total Money Makeover, Millennial Money, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Money, Master the Game, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, The Automatic Millionaire, The Richest Man in Babylon, You Are a Badass at Making Money, Think and Grow Rich, The Science of Getting Rich, Happy Money, The Little Book of Common Sense Investing, and The Behavior Gap. My aim was to go through one book a day on Blinkist and then create a spider diagram with the summary. 15-20 minutes a day, that's all it took really. I built these diagrams up across 2 separate pages. To be honest, I did skip some days, but I simply made up for it by reading 2 books on other days. So what did I discover with this reading challenge? Well, my first concern was that the advice would start to get really repetitive or even boring. To my surprise, that didn't happen. Although several themes did keep coming up throughout this process, which I'll get to in a minute, there was enough variety from one book to the next to keep things fresh. My second concern was that the summaries would be too brief or oversimplified to get any real value from them. I can't say I found this to be the case either. No doubt there are details that a Blinkist summary just can't get across. Examples, case studies, perhaps more information on the author's background. But also you may have noticed that a lot of books contain a lot of fluff. Often the most important messages can be condensed to 5, 10, or 15 pages. It's just that the author has to pad the content out for publishers to actually accept the damn book. Overall, I discovered 29 main themes from these 14 books. So I'll aim to give an overview of these themes to hopefully save you a whole ton of time and effort. First though, what were my favourite books of the bunch? I don't think any of the books were a waste of time, but to be honest, these were my 5 picks that I would recommend you check out. The Barefoot Investor for its personal finance system, The Automatic Millionaire for its data on the compound effect and long-term investing, Rich Dad Poor Dad for its breakdown of assets and liabilities, I Will Teach You to Be Rich for its information on retirement savings, credit scores, and the conscious spending plan, and finally, Money Master the Game for its research on taxes, average expenses, and the Ray Dalio investment structure. I don't know if it's a coincidence that all of these books were amongst some of my earlier reads on the list. Maybe themes did start to repeat and made the later books less entertaining, but honestly it didn't feel like that. I do think it is purely coincidental. Let's fire through these themes then. Feel free to pause. At times, I recognise it's probably a lot of information, and you may want to learn it in chunks rather than all in one go, but I'll leave that up to you. Theme 1. Systems for Personal Finance. Across these books, there were several personal finance plans or systems put forward by the authors as a sensible way to manage your money. My ultimate favourite was the 60-20-20 plan by Scott Pape in The Barefoot Investor. Scott suggests that 60% of your income should go on essential expenses. He says that it should probably be split up into something like this: 30% on mortgage or rent, 15% on food, 5% on mobile phone and other bills, and 10% on car or other transport expenses. Then, the next 20% goes on savings. Savings priority number 1 is to pay off debt. Priority number 2 is to build a 3-month buffer of living expenses. Once they're out of the way, you can start paying into a stock portfolio. Finally, the last 20% of the plan is broken down into 10% for long-term fun, like traveling or home renovations, and 10% for short-term fun, like meals out or trips to the cinema. Overall, I definitely plan to trial this system with a few adjustments for my own current life setup, which I'll get into in a future video. Other systems for personal finance include Dave Ramsey's in Total Money Makeover. His order of priority is fairly similar. First, get out of debt. Then invest 15% of your income in tax-favored retirement accounts, and invest in good growth stock mutual funds. He also suggests that you work with a financial advisor if need be. Personally, I don't really think an advisor is necessary. All the information is out there for you to educate yourself if you want. Just don't make any risky decisions straight away. Finally, there's the Conscious Spending Plan by Ramit Sethi in I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I actually hate this book title, but I do understand, Ramit. You got to do what you got to do for those book sales. Anyway, Ramit advises that 60% of your cash should go on fixed costs like rent, debt, and utilities. 10% should be invested into 401k accounts or Roth IRA accounts. 10% should be saved up for holidays, gifts, and so forth. And 20% should be simply for guilt-free spending, like clothes, leisure activities, whatever is meaningful to you. So as you can see, there are some similarities across the board. Which works best for you, I wonder? I suggest you review your own situation. Maybe you live with family and don't have to pay any rent. Well, that's an advantage. It means you can save more money in the other areas. Woohoo! Or maybe you've got a big fat car repair bill coming up and you might have to shift things around a bit to be able to afford it. I think the point is here, don't rely on your own willpower. Set up a personal finance system that works for you and make it easier for yourself. This brings me on to the next theme, automation. Ramit Sethi is big on automation. He tells us to automate and set limits. And in The Automatic Millionaire, David Bark tells us that if you're in a relationship, you should try and save a set amount of money each month as a couple. This amount should be non-negotiable and set up automatically, as it will help you reduce the likelihood of fighting about money, which is one of the most common causes of frictions in relationships. Perhaps my favourite point on automation comes from Carl Richards' book, The Behaviour Gap. He says that you should be boring in your financial habits for long-term gain. Theme 3. Investing. If I learned anything from these books, the lesson that's perhaps repeated the most is that investing is the single most effective way to get rich. In the book Money, Master the Game by Tony Robbins, we're informed about Ray Dalio's investing strategy. Now, Ray Dalio is a billionaire hedge fund manager and philanthropist, so I'm pretty sure we can trust his advice. Dalio invests 55% of his money in bonds, 30% in stocks, 7.5% in gold, and 7.5% in commodities. Personally, I'm in my 20s, late 20s, but still my 20s. I can afford to take a few more risks, so 55% in bonds seems too cautious to me. I'll get into that a bit later, but I definitely like the idea of spreading your investments over 4 different areas to minimize risk. I also highly recommend that you watch Ray Dalio's video on YouTube called How the Economic Machine Works. It's super educational to get a bird's eye view of the various factors at play within the economy and see how much of it really relates to systems. Another way that the theme of investing appeared was in book 12 on the list, Happy Money by Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton. They made me think outside the box by suggesting we should invest in time-saving goods, as time is the one thing that we can't get back in life. They give the example of a $300 robot vacuum cleaner, which may seem ridiculously pricey, but they say how much time it could save us over the next months and years. Really, it's made me consider how I can use software and technology to solve more of my problems. And this includes using financial software to save time and more efficiently track my income and expenses. Talking of expenses, this is the next theme, and maybe the scariest one for us to think about. In Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, we're told about how the average US adult's yearly expenses is around $34,000. While in book 6, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, we're advised to think about what's important to us in terms of spending, not societal norms. We must be mindful of the pressure from society to buy material goods like fancy watches, cars, and so on, things that probably don't make us truly happy long term. A concept I liked a lot from book 7 on the list, Automatic Millionaire, was something called the latte factor. David Bark shows us how $3.50 per day on a latte totals an incredible $1,250 per year. Now, I'm a weirdo who doesn't actually drink coffee, so this doesn't relate to me directly, but it can certainly be applied in other areas. I guess I'm pretty fortunate that I don't get tempted to buy food and drink out every day and generally prefer home cooking, but we should definitely track those sneaky daily or weekly expenses that add up over time. My favourite piece of advice related to expenses was in the book Happy Money. The authors say that we should focus on spending money on experiences, not materials. Of course, we do need our baseline material needs met to have access to food, warmth, and somewhere to sleep. But beyond that, when you think about what makes you happiest, it's experiences, right? Maybe a road trip with a friend, or a family meal at a nice restaurant. I realised I have kind of been doing this since 2011, when I booked a skydive for my 20th birthday. Since then, I've aimed to use some of the money that I've received on birthdays to book memorable experiences that were ideally either new to me or challenging in some way. In 2012, I did a bungee jump with my mum, and then in the years following that, I did an obstacle course charity run, Tough Mudder with a group of friends, a half marathon, climbed Mount Snowdon in Wales, walked across the whole of Exmoor National Park with my dad, created an online business, wrote a fiction novel, and then went on to this year write a non-fiction self-help book. Looking back, these yearly experiences have become some of my top life memories to date, so I can definitely vouch that experiences are, for the most part, more important to me than material goods. Theme 5. Mindset. Mindset, dude, you gotta get your mindset right. How often have we heard the online motivation gurus ramming this stuff down our throats? But a lot of these authors about money seem to agree that mindset is vital. Needing approval keeps people stuck in the rat race, argues Robert Kiyosaki in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're afraid to take financial risks for fear of others judging us. And in Jen Sincero's book, You Are a Badass at Making Money, she tells us that we should check our mindset to see how we view rich people. In her words, money isn't good or bad, we can choose how to use it. There is this all rich people are mean and greedy fallacy that we can get trapped in. And I do it myself. In fact, just the other week, I was walking down one of the poshest roads in my local area, and it was easy to feel envious of the massive houses. But it was a sunny day, and I saw the homeowners in their huge gardens, either reading or hanging laundry up, doing normal people things. And then there was even a poster for a pop-up art gallery at a house on the same road, which I decided to go along to. To be honest, the people there just seemed relaxed, not egocentric or arrogant. Another idea from Jen Sincero's book is to write 2 separate Dear Money letters. She says to write one in a more negative mind frame and one in a more positive mind frame, and see which letter about money is actually the most true. She goes on to say that money can bring different emotions to your life, so really we should seek to earn it fairly and in service. This made me think about how I can best be of service as a freelance writer, how I can be a fair landlord to the tenant in my rental property. It made me plan how I can donate some of my income each month, starting small but aiming to scale this according to how my income hopefully grows over time. Another point on mindset is in book 11 on the list, The Science of Getting Rich. In this book, the author Wallace Wattles says that the health of our mind, body, and soul dictates our success and happiness. So, we shouldn't feel guilty to pursue wealth, to afford materials such as good food and clothing and shelter for the body, education and books or training for the mind, and to be able to afford activities and to be able to build relationships, to connect with others for the health of the soul. My favourite idea from these books in terms of mindset was to get into the mental habit of paying yourself first, as advised in The Automatic Millionaire. I'm not the best at spending money, to be honest, and I can be pretty frugal and miserly at times. So the idea of paying myself first is a good workaround, as I can then feel less wasteful or guilty when I'm spending. This thinking is backed up in book 8 on the list, The Richest Man in Babylon, where the author George Clason preaches that a part of all you earn is yours to keep. Ain't that nice? The Richest Man in Babylon also emphasizes that we should avoid procrastination and really seize wealth opportunities when they arise. We need to get out of the mindset that wealth will magically appear for us someday. We actually have to set goals and get to work. Jen Sincero also gives us a good example of the actor Jim Carrey, who wrote himself a $10 million check for himself in 3 years' time to serve as motivation for him to make it big as an actor. This made me think what figure I'd write down on my own 3-year check. What would your number be? Linked to mindset, theme 6 is perseverance. The book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill tells us about the incredible case study of Thomas Edison, the inventor. Edison conducted 10,000 failed experiments trying to make electric light, but he persevered to get what he wanted. He had a burning desire and unwavering faith, as Think and Grow Rich promotes. This made me think how I could perhaps adapt Thomas Edison's ethic to my own circumstances. Maybe I could set the ambitious task of sending 10,000 pitches to potential writing clients. We must always be open to learning and commit to the long game. This is the key to perseverance and a great mindset. As summarized in The Science of Getting Rich, do your utmost without overworking yourself. Theme 7, self-awareness. My big takeaway here was to be very aware of my own strengths and weaknesses, as Napoleon Hill underlines in book 10 on the list. While in book 11, The Science of Getting Rich, the author tells us to use our natural talents and asks, what do you love doing? On reflection, I know that some of my biggest strengths are being organized, self-disciplined, creative, and analytical. My weaknesses include being overcautious, tense, and feeling self-doubt. In terms of what I love, well, that would be writing, reading, and creating content that I hope can inspire people. So I'm going to double down on these things. What are some of the things that you love to do, and what are some of the strengths that you can make the most of? Theme 8, auto-suggestion. The book Think and Grow Rich promotes the technique of auto-suggestion to imprint financial goals on the unconscious mind. Napoleon Hill says that positive emotions are key to a successful life, so it makes sense to feed your mind positive things about money. Napoleon gives you the idea of creating a detailed plan with your goals and then to read them both when you wake up and at night before you go to sleep. In The Science of Getting Rich, we're also told to visualize your desires and be specific. This sounds a lot like the law of attraction, which I feel quite conflicted about. I don't believe it's as powerful as people can make out, but I think there's a place for it in our everyday life. Personally, I've had a motivational note stuck to my desk which relates to one of my big career goals. But to be honest, after a week or two, it's easy for this note to become invisible. It can lose its impact. Daily affirmations and visualizations can be a drag when you don't see progress fast. But I do think that they can act as a mental reset, particularly when you've had a bad day, and can ensure that you don't lose too much momentum after a setback. In terms of life goals, as covered in a previous video, I've set myself 15 key goals for the month in 5 key areas, which are financial, mental, physical, social, and spiritual. So it will be intriguing to see how they work out, and I'll make a video update on this in due course. Theme 9: Social Connections. Napoleon Hill prompts you to surround yourself with smart people in his book Think and Grow Rich. It's often said that we are a mixture of the 5 people we hang around the most, and I think there's some truth to this. We are impressionable to others' ideas, perceptions, and habits, even if we don't realize this or indeed like it. Meanwhile, in The Behavior Gap, book 14 on the list, we're warned to be aware of the herd mentality when it comes to money, which can be the negative side of social influence. He discusses the US housing bubble in 2005 and 2006, which led to too many people buying big mortgages that later led to a financial crisis with many borrowers unable to refinance. Really, this theme reminds me that I should simultaneously surround myself with people who know more about building wealth than I do, and also ensure that I ultimately make my own decisions rather than being peer pressured. It's a hard balance to strike, but there you go, it's our own personal responsibility. My plan is to reach out to some of the big hitter YouTubers in my particular niche, who presumably make more money than I do. If I can nurture a circle of relevant connections over time, this can only serve my career progression. Theme 10: Happiness. Data shows that happiness is dictated more so by how we are spending money rather than the amount that we make, as outlined in the book Happy Money. This encourages me to spend consciously and give to others, such as buying inspirational books for friends or surprising my partner or family members with gifts. It also inspired me to set up a monthly donation to a Lyme disease charity, which is a cause I'm passionate about and have been personally affected by. I'm starting small with the donation, but I hope that this can expand with time. What's been found is that people presume they will be twice as happy if they doubled their salary from $25,000 to $50,000, but that actually the happiness increase was only 9%. Also, smaller pleasures bring more happiness than big spends, Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton tell us in book 12 on the list. And adults over the age of 50 are found to be happiest when they're spending money on leisure activities, such as going to the gym, which relates back to the idea that spending on experiences over materials point earlier on. Book 12's authors also talk us through the example of vacations. They remind us that it's actually the anticipation of a trip away that gives us more happiness than the trip itself. A few quick notable points on happiness to finish off. Live by the law of gratitude to attract more positivity and happiness, the science of getting rich suggests to us. Also, in the behavior gap, we're told that financial strength gives us security, not happiness per se. This point really resonated with me because I'm someone who gets more long-term contentment out of a feeling of security, more than that yippee, I'm so happy feeling, which tends to be more fleeting. The behavior gap also tells us that happiness levels only increase up to a $75,000 a year salary, with diminishing returns after that. What are my key takeaways for the connection between money and happiness then? Well, firstly, I need to remember that there's a limit to how much happiness money can give me. Around a $75,000 salary looks like the ideal to get the most amount of happiness juice, if you like, from an income, without working yourself half to death. So I figure that's got to be my aim, a $75,000 salary, which works out around £57,000 in the UK. Also, it seems like with financial goals, it's more the journey of what you discover about yourself on the way than the financial destination. So, I intend to set dreams and goals for myself that are actually exciting on their own, without really needing a certain thing to happen for me to be happy. Finally, what these books taught me is to allow myself to spend more on leisure. Like the book Happy Money showed, people are happiest when they spend money on leisure activities. So if I want to spend £10 on a meditation class or a yoga class or take a day trip, I shouldn't feel so guilty about this as I sometimes do. Because if it boosts my happiness, the chances are I'm going to feel even more motivated to continue to be even more financially successful, and the positive feedback loop can carry on. Theme 11. Frugality. What did I just say about guilt-free spending? Well, several books on this list underline the importance of frugality. There's always contradictions in books, isn't there? We just have to deal with them. The Richest Man in Babylon advises us to live below our means. And Jen Sincero tells us in book 9 on the list that you should get specific about why you want money and how much you really need. The point here is that people can become addicted to both making and spending money. We have to be careful to check in with ourselves regularly and see if we're spending on anything that seems reckless or unnecessary. Robert Kiyosaki sends the warning that greed leads people to buy cars rather than stocks, which is a nice reminder not to waste a load of money on a flash Mercedes or Aston Martin sometime in the future. And in the book Happy Money, we're told to avoid the consume now, pay later trap. The authors suggest that we can create little luxuries rather than spending big. This could include making an event out of an afternoon tea or coffee at a cafe as a reward for a productive morning. Little luxuries for me, I've realised, could be allowing myself to buy a new unique item of clothing once a month if I hit certain goals, or allowing myself to buy a new book, or even a box of brownie-flavoured protein bars. What would be some little luxuries for you? On to theme 12, long-term thinking. Now, the next two themes are tied together. In book 3 on the list, Millennial Money, we hear that stocks lose value 31% of the time over the course of 1 year, but on average over 20 years they never lose money. This kind of blew my mind, to be honest. It also says that bonds do lose money over 20 years. So, a reminder for me is that the bulk of my investments should be in stocks, and that as long as I don't need the cash urgently, stocks are worth the increased risk compared with bonds. I'm going to aim for 70% stocks, 30% bonds in my portfolio at this time. In the book Automatic Millionaire, the author shares the real-life example of a couple named Jim and Sue McIntyre. Now, they really did think long-term. They never earned more than $40,000 per year, but by their 50s they had a net worth of over $2 million, just from investing smartly. Finally, in the behavior gap, we're instructed to focus on the next 3 years rather than 15 or 20 years ahead. 3 years is long-term enough. It stops us from acting on impulse and making bad decisions, while also reducing the amount of unpredictable factors that are out of our control when you think 20 years ahead. Theme 13, the compound effect. Very much related to long-term thinking, I found that the compound effect comes up time and time again in these books. Tony Robbins quotes Einstein in his book, who said that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Pretty nice quote, huh? But how does this effect work in practice? Well, we can go back as far as the late 1700s, when founding father Benjamin Franklin left $1,000 in his will to the states of Boston and Philadelphia. He asked that they invest it in a 5% interest earning account for 100 years. In that 100 years, it reached a staggering $1 million due to the compound effect, where any profits at the year's end were automatically reinvested back into the same account, so that the balance stacked up over time. Patience is a virtue with investing, it seems. And in book 3 on the list, Patrick O'Shaughnessy outlines how investing $10,000 per year throughout your 20s would generate an amazing $4.7 million by the age of 65. Obviously, this yearly saving is unrealistic for most people in their 20s, but it is something to at least aim for or think about. David Bark has more inspirational advice for people in their 20s in book 7 on the list. He says that if you invest $2,000 per year in your 20s, you'll have over $1 million by age 65. This is perhaps more realistic. Say you finish education and get a full-time job. Is it really so impossible to save $2,000 of your annual salary and invest this each year? Only you can know, and it does depend on individual circumstances, but I think a lot of people could achieve this with the correct system in place. My favourite breakdown of the compound effect comes from The Automatic Millionaire. The author summarises how a saving of $14 per day for 35 years at a 10% annual interest would generate $1.6 million. It did cross my mind though that the average interest rate for stock portfolios is more like 7 to 8% from what I've read. At least that seems to be the case in the UK. So what if we were more cautious and saved $14 per day for 35 years in a 7% interest earning stock account? That's still $723,000 with an incredible interest earned of $546,000. $14 per day right now is around £10.67, which is around £74 or £75 per week and around £320 per month. It seems doable to me, so I'm at least going to try it. Theme 14, Skill versus Luck. As quoted in The Richest Man in Babylon, one of Socrates' famous sayings was, "I know that I know nothing." Admitting how little you know can be an advantage in the world of personal finance. It stops you from getting ahead of yourself and making stupid choices. Indeed, we should make rational rather than emotional decisions in finance, as Carl Richards warns us in the book The Behavior Gap. Really, these pieces of advice make it clear that, particularly before making a big investment or spending decision, we should give it a little time. Make a pros and cons list. See if you feel as strongly the next day or next week, rather than just launching straight in. The behavior gap also tells us that timing is a big factor when it comes to building wealth, and luck plays more of a role than people give it credit for. Can we predict with 100% confidence when the economy is going to rise and fall? No. Look at the coronavirus pandemic. A year ago, it could not have been predicted, yet it's greatly shaped the present global economy. So we have to accept that there is quite a significant degree of luck involved. Theme 15, Emergency Funds. Just a quick one here, but this did come up in a few of the books. For example, Ramit Sethi in I Will Teach You to Be Rich says that we should put 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in an account as an emergency fund before we do any investing, to protect ourselves against a sudden loss of income or surprise expenses. The exact emergency fund time length you should aim for is up for dispute, Different financial experts will tell you different things. Some may say 2 or 3 months, others may say 6 or 12 months. Choose the figure that suits you and that is actually realistic to aim for now. Personally, in this crazy economic situation we have at the moment, I'd say that 6 months savings is sensible to aim for if you can, so this will be my approach. Theme 16, Inflation. Another lesson from I Will Teach You to Be Rich is to pay close attention to inflation, which averages around 2% a year in the UK, and I think is around 3% in the US. If you're wondering what inflation is, essentially it's a measure of how the average price of goods and services in an economy increase over time. So, a unit of currency effectively buys you less than it did in previous years. With inflation at a 2% average, you are actually losing money by letting it sit in a bank account, Ramit Sethi tells us, and I can't help but agree. Frankly, I've been too safe and have too much money in my savings account just sitting there being lazy. I need to be more proactive in deciding where I want to invest it in the mid to long term, whether that be more in stocks, putting more into real estate, or even business investments. Theme 17, Debt and Mortgages. Avoiding debt or getting out of debt as quickly as possible is a common theme in personal finance books, such as The Richest Man in Babylon and Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. This reminded me to not fall into the trap of getting big loans or overspending on big mortgages. Indeed, Dave Ramsey advises people to aim for shorter-term mortgages that are more affordable, not the 30-year mortgages that people often get sucked into. A 15-year mortgage, he says, is much better than a 30-year one, even if the upfront payments are more expensive. Truly, the pleasure of buying a huge house is probably going to be outweighed by the longer-term stress of having to make large mortgage repayments for the decades ahead. So avoid debt wherever possible and be content with less. Theme 18, Be wary of experts. Ramit Sethi tells us to ignore the experts and invest the simple way. I laughed at this, with the irony being that he is positioning himself as an expert on money. After all, it comes from a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Nonetheless, I agree with his point. When I was first educating myself on finance in my early 20s, it was tempting to look for mentors or guides, but you can end up either becoming overwhelmed or overpaying for financial advice. Ramit Sethi warns us that not one of these so-called experts can consistently predict how funds or stocks will perform in the market long term. So it's a safer bet to invest in life cycle or index funds instead. Theme 19, Taxes. Oh, this is a fun one, isn't it? To be honest, I don't feel this particular list of 14 books gave me a great education on taxes. I've still got a lot of work to do on this particular topic. But in books like Money, Master the Game by Tony Robbins, they do discuss taxes and how much people tend to pay. An average American pays around 54% of their income in taxes, which is quite staggering. What's clear is that tax is one of the biggest, or if not the biggest, expense across our lifetime. If there are ways to reduce this level of tax in a legal way, then why not? The best tax reduction strategy, as mentioned in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is to set up your own corporation. I did this a couple of years ago when I set up my own company, which was surprisingly easy to do, and I plan to pay more attention to expenses that I could potentially write off from being taxed due to classifying them as business investments. This could include stationery, software, books, and so forth. I do feel strongly that tax is one area you don't want to mess up in, so when it's time for my next tax return in 2021, I'll be seeking to find a tax advisor who's got experience with completing returns for digital freelancers. Theme 20. Professions. I'd never really thought of a career or profession like this before, but Robert Kiyosaki advises us to look at your profession as merely being a way to fund your investments or assets. He says that you should seek to invest in business adventures such as real estate or stocks, until eventually the income generated from these assets is more than the income you get from your profession. This is a pretty awesome mental reframe to stop yourself from feeling stuck in a career until the end of your life. Now, I do think the ideal solution would be to experiment until you find a profession you actually like, because I do believe we're meant to work as human beings, but that's not to say you can't invest alongside the income you get from your profession. In fact, it seems like a very sensible thing to do. Theme 21. Index funds versus active funds. This was one of my favourite parts of my mini 2-week financial education. As discussed in the book Millennial Money, index funds are the safe bet, even though they won't beat the market. And in the little book of Common Sense Investing by John Bogle, we're told that index funds are safer and more cost efficient due to an automatically diverse portfolio, which can better ride out the rises and falls in the stock market. Actively managed funds can be expensive over time, Millennial Money warns us, due to the fees and brokerage commissions, and the author says that we generate less profit potential in the long term than we do with low-cost index funds. He also gives us the interesting stat that of 366 equity funds that were open in the 1970s, 233 of them have since closed. Finally, in the little book of Common Sense Investing, we're told that a $10,000 investment in 1980 would, by time of the book release in 2007, have generated 70% less in an actively managed fund than it would have done in an index fund. Overall, this lesson taught me that choosing the cheapest index fund available in your country is probably the best choice, and to avoid actively managed funds unless you know more about what you're doing. Theme 22. Interest rates. This is another quick one. In the book I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Ramit Sethi gives us a heads up that banks operating with purely online services will often provide the better interest rates. The author runs us through an example of how a $25,000 saving amount would perform in a 3% interest account versus a 0.5% interest account. In the 3% interest account, you would earn $750 per year from that $25,000 savings. Whereas in the 0.5% interest account, you'd only earn $125, which is quite a big difference, and I will certainly be looking at the bank accounts that can perform the best for me, even if generally in the UK they are pretty crap at the moment, to be honest, across the board. Theme 23. Millionaire Misconceptions. If you want to be a millionaire, it seems like the best approach is to not get pulled into being one of those people who likes to show off. Dave Ramsey says in Total Money Makeover that the typical millionaire lives in a middle-class home, drives a 2-year-old or older paid-for car, and buys jeans at Walmart, which I think was a really nice summary, that if you want financial security and you want to build wealth, don't focus on impressing other people, think long-term, don't show off. Theme 24. Credit scores. I Will Teach You to Be Rich goes into a nice amount of detail on credit scores. Ramit Sethi states that punctual debt repayments for example credit card repayments, will make up 35% of your credit score. Also, having a good credit score means that on a $200,000 mortgage, you'd pay around $359,000 over a 30-year loan term. Whereas with a bad credit score, you'd pay around $430,000, a significant increase. I knew about credit scores already and did check mine a few years ago, but it's inspired me to check it again and also to cancel any inactive cards that I may have, just in case I do need to take a loan out for a mortgage in the future. It's clear that having a good credit score can greatly influence how much your loan repayments will be in the long term. Theme 25: Reasons for Financial Failure. Patrick O'Shaughnessy says in Millennial Money that a big reason for financial failure is that investors often buy during peaks due to fear of missing out, and then sell during crashes due to fear of losing everything. The lesson here is to not be too reactive with your investments. I know that in my first year investing in stocks, it was so tempting to check balances every week or even every day and panic if a certain stock price dropped. But I must say I have never sold at a loss, even if a couple of companies I've invested in, like Vodafone for example, are around 50% lower now due to Brexit and then COVID following that. Now would be a silly time to sell. I've just got to accept it, be patient, and know that I don't need the cash urgently. Another reason for financial failure, it seems, is the lack of money people are saving year on year. In The Automatic Millionaire, we're informed that the average US adult saves less than 5% of their gross annual income. You've got to say that there's something wrong with that, whether it's more due to the system or people's personal responsibility. That's up for debate, but try and save wherever you can. Be strict with yourself. It's your life after all. The final point within the financial failure theme is about determination. In Think and Grow Rich, we're told about an analysis of 25,000 people who failed to achieve professional success. What was the main reason that they didn't get success? In their words, it was that they lacked the necessary determination. Theme 26: Culture Shifts. An intriguing statistic in Millennial Money is that only 28% of millennials are currently investing in stocks, whereas 46% of people from the generations before them invested in stocks. Perhaps after the 2008 economic crisis, millennials have lost faith in the stock market, or maybe they simply have less cash to invest. For all its flaws, I still think the stock market is one of the best places to invest your money, as long as you go about it as sensibly and wisely as possible. But it's certainly interesting to see in my own friendship groups how many people seem to still be hesitant about investing in stocks. This leads into the next theme, which again kind of contradicts this one. Theme 27: Risk-taking. Rich Dad Poor Dad states that building wealth demands a level of willingness to take risks. Putting money in a savings account is fine, but it's most likely not going to make you wealthy. Investments such as real estate and stocks are more inherently risky, yes, but the potential for returns are much greater. My big takeaway from this was that my natural tendency would be to be too cautious with continuing to pump money into a savings account, earning no interest, and not benefiting from the compound effect. So instead, I should give myself a set amount of my income, such as 15%, to allow myself to be more risky per se and invest in stocks. Theme 28: Assets versus Liabilities. One of the biggest lessons from Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad is the differentiation between assets and liabilities. Essentially, assets make you money. Liabilities cost you money. The big mistake, he says, lower and middle class people make is investing too much money in liabilities and not enough in assets. The lines can get blurred here though. It's not always obvious what is an asset and what is a liability. For example, a mortgage is a liability because it costs you money to secure and also costs you money to pay off each month. But if your home rockets in value over the next 20 years and you can sell it at a profit that outweighs your mortgage repayments, then it could become an asset. Another option could be getting a mortgage for an investment property to rent out. If the monthly rent received outweighs the mortgage repayment amount, then this is an asset. But if the mortgage repayment is more than the rent you get from a tenant, then at present you're losing money and it's therefore a liability. So be careful, alright? Try and focus on assets and don't jump into investment decisions until you know that the finances work out on paper. Finally, theme 29, retirement. How much would a US adult with average yearly expenses need to save in a fund to be able to live off compound interest during their retirement? Tony Robbins enlightens us in Money Master the Game. He says that the figure would be $640,000 with an average yearly American expense of $34,000, as we mentioned earlier. Tony Robbins doesn't seem to be such a fan of employer pensions, in light of many people having lost their money in their pensions during the 2008 crisis. Robert Kiyosaki tells us in book 4 on the list that 50% of US adults have no pensions. And in I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Ramit Sethi breaks down the difference between 401ks and Roth IRAs, which are both potential retirement funds. Now, being from the UK, this doesn't directly relate to me, but it was interesting to learn about them nonetheless. A 401k is sponsored by your employer and is only taxed when you withdraw the money at retirement. With the Roth IRA, on the other hand, this is more of a personal pension plan, which is taxed at the start, but the interest you earn over time is not taxed, so there are slightly different advantages here. Personally, I don't have a pension with an employer. Even when I was in a traditional employment, I just didn't like the idea that my money was going somewhere for over 30 years, somewhere that I couldn't view the exact amount. But through my 20s, I have been mindful that I need to be keeping money aside for retirement. I've generally aimed for 12 to 15% per year of whatever income I earned in that year. I have been reviewing this every 6 to 12 months for the past few years. This pension money is currently combined with other savings I have in one account, so I think I do need to put the pension pot in a different account just to create a sense of separation. Woohoo! We did it! How do you feel? My voice is frickin' knackered. I hope you've gotten some value from these 29 themes. If you want to check out some of the books, I'll try and link them below so you can check them out on Amazon. They will be affiliate links, of course, so feel free not to click them if you don't want to, but you won't pay anything more if you do decide to buy one or two of them through the links. I will plan to record a follow-up video to this one, where I'll explain what actions these books have inspired me to take in terms of my own personal finance plan. This YouTube channel is all about work-life balance, trying to strike the right balance of what I see as the 5 main pillars for a good life, which are financial, mental, physical, social, and spiritual well-being. Of course, you're welcome to subscribe if you generally enjoy content on financial and general life well-being, but no worries if it's not your thing. Overall, I definitely enjoyed this challenge of reading 14 books in 2 weeks. It forced me to think outside the box, to be a more proactive and creative reader, and made me appreciate Blinkist more as an educational tool. As I said, I didn't want to passively skim through the topic of personal finance, but rather deep dive into the topic to bring core themes together for both you and I to learn and hopefully benefit from. Let me know in the comments which books you plan to read from the ones we've covered today and what your goals are for building wealth and financial balance as you move forward with your life. Thanks so much for watching.